My phone's shrill ring pierced through the midnight silence like a banshee's wail, jolting me from the depths of sleep with all the gentleness of a sledgehammer to the skull. The clock's neon digits mockingly displayed 12 a.m., the witching hour, when nothing good ever comes from an unexpected call, especially from family. And oh boy, was I about to discover just how right that superstition could be. The voice on the other end belonged to a cousin, a relative whose existence had completely evaded my consciousness until that very moment, who had the audacity, nay the sheer audacity, to request me to babysit her grown children. What followed was not just chaos, but a cascade of increasingly absurd events that would eventually culminate in a restraining order. Being 28 and working full-time, you'd think such requests would be irrelevant to my life. But apparently in my family, blood ties trump all logic and reason, even when I can only identify 7% of them by name and a mere 15% by face. And trust me, those percentages aren't just random numbers I pulled out of thin air. They're the result of painful experience at numerous family gatherings. Let me paint you a picture of my family tree. Or should I say family forest? We're talking about a labyrinth of 400 Mildreds, 250 Lindis, and 800 Stephanies, Chelseas, and Janets that materialize like clockwork during every celestial alignment when my immediate family manages to synchronize their schedules. It's like a cosmic joke where the universe decides to dump every possible variation of these names into one family gathering. As the youngest of three, I've managed to carve out a niche at a relatively forgiving job, though it's not that bad, and I make time for the people who actually feature regularly in my life. You know, the ones whose names I can actually remember without consulting a family directory the size of a phone book. The catalyst for this particular adventure was, of all things, a funeral, because nothing brings out the family connection quite like death. Throughout the pre-ceremony gathering, I found myself trapped in an endless loop of the eternal question. Do you remember me? Picture this. A sea of vaguely familiar faces, each expecting recognition, each holding years of shared history that I apparently was part of but had absolutely no recollection of. To avoid any social awkwardness and potential inheritance drama, I perfected what I call the funeral smile, a carefully crafted expression that walks the fine line between yes, of course I remember you, and I'm appropriately somber for the occasion. I responded with a well-rehearsed string of yes, of course, it's been ages, while my brain frantically searched its archives for any hint of recognition. Then, like a character straight out of a particularly absurd sitcom, this cousin, whose existence had completely evaded my memory but apparently holds daily conversations with my mother, a fact that would later prove both amusing and terrifying, materialized before me. She wasn't just any cousin. She was the cousin, the one who would turn my life into a 3-act play of chaos, complete with plot twists and a grand finale that would make Shakespeare's comedies look tame. She introduced her offspring who, according to her breathless description, had been dying to meet me, an unfortunate choice of words given our current location. What the actual hell? Screamed my internal monologue, but I maintained my composure, given the somber occasion. She informed me that her children resided merely 40 minutes from my home and were approximately my age. I nodded politely while mentally filing this under things I'll never need to remember. She mentioned discussing it with my mother and proposed a gathering later this year. I responded with a non-committal all right, treating it as something I wouldn't need to worry about, even though I'm not 14 anymore and don't need permission for social engagements. Fast forward 45 minutes, and my phone erupted with a call from a number in my extended family's hometown, too specific to be spam. Panic seized me. After all, my recently departed grandfather wasn't much older than my grandmother, who was still down there. I answered with trepidation. "Hi, name, it's your relative," chirped the voice on the other end. My brain short-circuited like a calculator being asked to divide by 0, but I managed a cautious, "Hey, is everything okay?" "Yes," she responded, sounding perplexed by my concern. "Everything's fine, just checking when you're free for lunch this weekend with children's names." My mind resembled that meme with mathematical equations floating around a confused face before I finally pieced together who this midnight caller was. "Remember at the funeral," she continued, "we discussed getting together later with kids' names. Plus, son's name is applying to the university, and daughter's name is transferring there for her junior year. I thought we could meet after their Saturday morning tour, and you could take them out to lunch. No alcohol, though. Son's name is only 18. The conversation spiraled into absurdity as she revealed that her about-my-age children were actually 18 and 22, with the elder requiring parental supervision for alcohol consumption. I burst into uncontrollable laughter that probably sounded like a hysterical pterodactyl, much to her evident displeasure. She launched into a detailed explanation about how her 22-year-old daughter doesn't understand moderation and isn't allowed to drink unless she or her husband are present. What on earth would a 28-year-old have in common with an 18 and 22-year-old? Perhaps I'm overthinking it. Don't do drugs, focus on your studies, and don't get anyone pregnant, seemed like the extent of potential conversation topics. I worked doubles on Saturdays until 8 p.m. I managed between gasps of laughter. Well, first of all, I don't see what's so funny, she snapped back with the indignation of a queen whose servant had just sneezed on her crown. And 8 p.m. isn't late at all. You could have a nice dinner or do something else. 8 p.m. really isn't that late. My patience, already hanging by a thread, finally snapped. Ma'am, this isn't Star Trek. I can't just beam myself across town after an 11-hour shift. I'm not interested in babysitting, and I won't be home until around 9. While this is indeed a college town, I can recommend some establishments for you to explore independently. They do serve other drinks besides alcohol, you know, she retorted primly. Excuse me, but I know your mother didn't raise you to be rude, especially to family, she admonished. Look, I don't know you, I shot back. You're calling me at an ungodly hour to arrange a meetup with your children, who are not my age, and I have no idea who you are. You're all young adults. Girl, I pay my own health insurance. We are not in the same league. Please don't call me again. The conversation deteriorated further until I finally hung up, leaving my fiancé, now awake and thoroughly amused by this midnight theater, to witness my exasperation. We had a brief debate about this absurdity, and I secretly hoped she would complain to my mother about my behavior, knowing full well that my mom would question why anyone would make such a call at such an ungodly hour. Little did I know my offhand joke about her tattling to my mother would manifest like a self-fulfilling prophecy. She actually woke up my hard-working mother, a woman who, beneath her fairy godmother exterior, could transform into a rogue chainsaw when provoked. My mother, the epitome of grace under pressure, listened to her incoherent ranting before hanging up mid-sentence, only to call her back after fortifying herself with coffee. When my mother called me, her voice trembled with barely contained mirth. Honey, she began, did you really make a Star Trek reference to explain why you couldn't have dinner with your cousin's kids? I could hear her struggling to maintain her maternal composure, like a balloon ready to burst with laughter. Indeed I did, I replied. Since I only possess a car and not a transporter, I thought it was a relevant comparison. That did it. My mother's laughter exploded through the phone like a supernova, so loud that my father in the next room joined in, their combined mirth threatening to shatter my phone's speaker. My mother couldn't even muster the strength to suggest I apologize yet, though I knew she wanted to. She advised waiting until my cousin had calmed down, but promised to keep me updated. I was driving to work during this call, which nearly caused me to crash my car from laughter. I understand your cousin was being ridiculous, but did you have to laugh at her? My mother asked, though I could hear her fighting back giggles. What she said next included a rather colorful nickname for my cousin. And yes, we're all black, so don't worry about that particular word choice. She came up with quite the creative moniker in her initial outburst, with the N-word making an appearance. But don't worry, we're all black. I'd never heard my mother use that word in my entire life. She was so furious that I'm amazed she managed to call this woman back and have a civil conversation. Therefore, I think it should be clear that nobody in this household should be worried about my behavior. I'm a bundle of kittens compared to my mom when she's exhausted. The brewing incident came next, literally and figuratively, a perfect storm of family drama and fermentation gone wrong. Picture this. There I was in my kitchen, channeling my inner alchemist over a carefully crafted beer recipe that I'd spent months perfecting. The air was thick with the rich, earthy aroma of malted grains and the promise of a perfect brew. My homegrown hops, nurtured through spring rains and summer heat, were finally ready to fulfill their destiny. The timing had to be perfect, each step precisely measured and executed with the care of a surgeon. And then, like a horror movie villain who just won't stay dead, the raccoon dog, as I dubbed her in my contacts list, a decision that would prove prophetic, materialized via phone once again. Against my better judgment and the screaming protests of my survival instincts, curiosity won out, and I answered. Hey, she began, her voice dripping with the kind of forced casualness that immediately sets off alarm bells. I wanted to apologize for the other night. The time didn't even cross my mind. I usually stay up late talking to someone. Can't relate, but yes, I understand, I replied, internally seething while stirring my precious wort with perhaps more vigor than necessary. Listen, I added, trying to maintain some semblance of civility while my inner voice was screaming. Hang up. Hang up now. I was in the midst of the most crucial part of my brewing process, preparing the wort, that magical sugar-water base that would eventually transform into liquid gold. For the uninitiated, brewing beer is like conducting a symphony. Every ingredient must enter at precisely the right moment. Every temperature change must be perfectly timed. The process involves boiling grains in a stock pot. Imagine making the world's most expensive tea. Turning off the heat at just the right moment. Too soon and you get sugar water. Too late and you get caramel, and not the good kind. Adding malt extracts while stirring until dissolved. Think stirring honey into hot tea, but with the consistency of molasses. Then bringing it all back to a boil with hops for various flavors and bitterness. What are you making? she asked, her tone shifting from apologetic to curious. I'm brewing wort for a new recipe I'm experimenting with, I replied, stirring the mixture carefully. What? What's that? Oh, it's the beer sugar base, I explained, immediately regretting my honesty. Did you say beer? Her voice dripped with disapproval. Yes. Oh, huh. Is your mom aware of what you're doing? I suppose so, since she knows I can make it, I responded, an awkward silence following. I said beer, not cocaine, I added defensively. You're acting like I'm breaking something. Well, I'm just concerned about the influence that could have on the children, she replied primly. Perhaps don't bring that up when you're around them. What began as a seemingly peaceful conversation about my brewing hobby quickly devolved into a lecture about the corrupting influence I might have on her precious offspring. She expressed horror at my beer-making activities and suggested I shouldn't mention it around her children. The irony of her concern over my legal hobby while she was planning to deposit her children with a virtual stranger was apparently lost on her. She then proceeded to inquire about affordable apartments and student housing near the university, clearly planning to position her children as my neighbors. Listen, she said, her voice dripping with forced enthusiasm. I know the area has lots of affordable apartments and student housing. Which ones should we look at that would be close to both the school and you? I couldn't help but smile grimly. Well, the rates are pretty reasonable for a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's about a 5 to 10 minute walk from the school. That's wonderful. You two could be neighbors. About that, I began, my patience wearing thinner by the second. We're actually moving to the city where I work, which is over 40 minutes away, so we won't be in the area. Wait, what? Are you saying you won't be able to visit them? Her voice hit a pitch that would make Britney Spears wince. Actually, no. We're moving closer to our jobs to cut down on commute time. That's the main goal. But you do it all the time, so I just don't understand why you couldn't go see them once or twice a week, she protested. Is spending a couple hours with your family really that inconvenient? You drive to see your parents' city despite the traffic. Yeah, but traffic is usually the reason dash. So you'll go see them even though you'll be even further away when you move? I don't understand why it's so inconvenient for you to drive halfway to see your relatives. Especially on days like today when you should be spending time with family instead of making booze. My carefully maintained civility crumbled as my wort boiled over, creating a sticky mess on my stove. Who the hell are you again? What do I owe you? What claim do you have on my time? If we hadn't crossed paths again, what would I be missing? Nothing, because I don't know you. An F***CK you for diverting my attention. My word is ruined now. I could hear my fiancé laughing in the next room, later telling me I sounded like an irate Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls. I was too focused on cleaning up the sticky mess of my ruined mixture before my cat could get to it to remember if she said anything else. I managed an angry "see you on Thanksgiving" before hanging up, though in my irritation I can't recall exactly what else was said. But the piece de resistance, the crescendo of this absurd symphony, came on Thanksgiving. For the first time since the drama began, I had absolutely nothing to do. The family Thanksgiving was canceled, my fiancé and I had to work Black Friday. My grandmother stayed home in remembrance of my grandfather, and my parents were visiting my brother. We were enjoying a peaceful horror movie marathon in our pajamas, savoring a delectable dinner and fantastic drinks I'd crafted myself, when my phone began to buzz like an angry hornet's nest. Multiple calls from an unknown number interrupted our holiday bliss until my fiancé, ever the voice of reason, suggested checking the voicemail. This is your landlord, the message began. Since the office is clearly closed, I'm using my personal phone. I apologize for disturbing your holiday, but I need a call back from you as soon as possible. By this point, I'd missed about 8 calls from this woman, and I called back in a panic, my heart pounding like a drum solo. Hey, I began, my voice trembling with anxiety. I'm so sorry I didn't realize this was you and Dash. No, honey, I understand. She cut me off, her voice carrying the weight of someone who just discovered an entire turkey in the toilet. Like everyone else, you were enjoying your holiday. Please don't even worry about it. The tension in her voice was palpable, like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. Do you know a woman named Raccoon Dog? My landlord asked, each word dripping with exhaustion. When I couldn't immediately place the name, she continued, her voice rising with barely contained frustration. She's been harassing our courtesy officer for the past hour and a half. She says she can't reach you after you invited her children over. My landlord, who knew us as the antisocial recluses we are, may she rest in peace, went into full nail salon black lady mode, her words tumbling out like a cascade of exasperation. She knows your identity, and she's been demanding we give her your apartment number, without mentioning your fiancé, by the way. No reputable business would just give out tenant information like that. You'd still be breaking the law even if we did. What is she doing? I asked, my voice rising with disbelief, my free hand clutching my forehead in dismay. She parked in front of the fire zone with her kids in the car and is shouting police brutality, because our courtesy officer gave her a fine and told her that if she doesn't move, we're going to have her car towed. My landlord explained, her voice a mixture of disbelief and resignation. Our apartment complex is very close to the university, and the main road leading to the separate properties is a frequently used route to many of the university buildings and a third of the fraternities. They take fire zone violations extremely seriously. Fines range from $500 to $2,000 depending on the location and severity. Can you formally state that you didn't invite her and don't want her here? My landlord asked, sounding like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. I explained everything from the beginning, and I could hear all the energy leave her body as she started laughing. Okay, I got this *TCH, she declared with renewed vigor, her voice taking on the tone of someone about to serve justice with a side of sass. The situation escalated faster than a cat chasing a laser pointer. She'd received a $2,000 fine for parking in the fire zone, resisted arrest, threatened a police officer, and ended up spending Thanksgiving night in jail. Her husband had to pay $3,500 for bail, and she faced an additional $7,500 in fines for trespassing, resisting arrest, and threatening a police officer. Her mortified children spent their holiday waiting at the police station until their father could rescue them from this festival of chaos. Later, I learned that Raccoon Dog had contacted my mother, her voice shrill with indignation, accusing me of lying about spending Thanksgiving with her children. Apparently, during that same phone call where I'd yelled at her about my ruined beer, she'd interpreted my sarcastic, "See you on Thanksgiving," as a genuine invitation. The whole debacle had cost her family $13,000 in total, $2,000 for the parking fine, $3,500 for bail, and $7,500 for the additional charges. The epilogue to this saga arrived in the form of a social media group chat that felt like a cross between a hostage negotiation and a therapy session. Her children, bless their traumatized hearts, reached out with messages that read like a combination of apology letter, confession, and cry for help. They revealed that the Thanksgiving debacle had been their breaking point, the final straw in a haystack of maternal misadventures that would make a reality TV producer salivate. These poor souls had spent their Thanksgiving in what could only be described as a 3-act tragedy. Act 1 featured them sitting in a car outside a random apartment complex, watching their mother audition for America's Most Dramatic Parent. Act 2 moved the action to the local police station, where they waited in plastic chairs that seemed designed by someone who hated humanity. And Act 3 culminated in the revelation that their Christmas fund had been sacrificed to the gods of bail, bonds, and legal fees. Imagine spending your holiday watching your mother transform from embarrassing parent to lead story on the local news, faster than you can say pass the cranberry sauce. My response to this outpouring of familial trauma? A simple yet powerful olive branch. There's a really great pizza place up the street. I'm off next Friday, and it's on me. I'm not sure what your schedules look like this weekend, because sometimes the best therapy comes in the form of melted cheese and pepperoni, served with a side of normal human interaction. So here I am, proud owner of both a pizza date and a restraining order, a combination that should probably be on my business card at this point. This whole thing has been such a cluster F***CK dumpster explosion of family dynamics, personal boundaries, and the dangers of sarcastic Thanksgiving invitations that I'm half expecting Netflix to option it for a limited series. I hope you've enjoyed sitting in this dumpster fire with me as much as I've enjoyed documenting it, because sometimes the best stories are the ones that make you grateful for your own family's particular brand of crazy. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Trust me, with my family tree being more like a family kudzu vine, there's never a shortage of material.